Kate here with another video. Hope everyone's doing well. And if you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. It helps me build the channel. I'm at 155 subscribers. I thank everyone who has subscribed. Now, you may hear during this video, you may hear some snoring in the background. That's one of my dogs. Max is tight asleep and he snores very loudly. It's cute. It is really cute. So this video is on Ukraine, the current Ukraine situation. Since I last made a video, a lot's been going on there with the Ukraine war. There's also a huge amount of Western media distortion in what's going on. Like if you listen to CNN in the U.S., CNN, MSNBC, Fox, NPR, basically any mainstream media outlet, I think they give a highly distorted view of what's happening in Ukraine. And the same would go for the BBC, Deutsche Welle, the CBC, Australian Broadcasting System. Any mainstream Western outlet will give a very distorted view of what's happening. There's definitely a pro-NATO narrative going on. And by the way, I don't know YouTube's censorship. It's possible they may delete the video. I don't really know. If so, I'll have this video on Rumble, posted on Rumble as well. It's like my insurance policy. Okay, here we go. So, there's been a lot of media distortion. What's happening with Ukraine war all along? That Russia's losing, Russia's bogged down, Russia's running out of weapons, running out of this. Russia's committing atrocities. They're indiscriminately killing civilians. That's entirely nonsense. First of all, Russia has a huge military-industrial complex. They're not running out of anything. They're not running out of missiles. They're not running out of tanks. There's media buzz. They're running out of tanks. That's not true. Russia bought drones from Iran recently, but doesn't mean they're running out of them. Okay, so when the war started back in February, the Russian invasion, they did miscalculate. Apparently, Russia came in with a much lighter force than they needed. They thought it was going to be like 2014, 2015 when the Ukrainian civil war in the Donbass started. 75% of the Ukrainian army collapsed. Like the civil war, which was provoked by the 2014 coup, the Maidan coup, the civil war with the Russian Donbass region was very unpopular in Ukraine. The army didn't want to go, like enlisted personnel or conscripts stayed in their barracks. Officers, some of whom were holdovers from the Soviet period, fled or didn't want to have anything to do with it. The militias, these Nazi militias, came in their stead. And there were standoffs or fights almost between the regular army and the militias. Anyway, so Russia this time invaded this year. They thought it was maybe going to be the same thing. That didn't happen. Then the Ukrainian army is now basically a NATO army. The officers are fanatic Ukrainian nationalists, very well trained, well equipped, well guided by NATO. It's a NATO army. It's not like it was in 2014. So the Russians realized their mistake. They beefed up their troops and came in much more aggressively. Really, I believe it was the third week of the war. Russia, by the way, has missile technology, really several generations more advanced than anything NATO has. Came out of the 2014 Syria intervention. These missiles were rolled out in 2018. The Russians have Kinzhal, Kalibra, Iskander, hypersonic missiles, which are more advanced than what NATO has. And they took out a so-called NATO peacekeeping center on the border of Poland. I forget the name of the city. It's like a suburb of Lviv or Lvov, a suburb of it. I forget the name, but there's a NATO peacekeeping center, so-called peacekeeping center, training center for NATO mercenaries, and the Russians hit it with 30 missiles. 230-something people were killed and 1,000 people fled. And the missiles were believed to have been sent from the Black Sea. Either the Black Sea or Crimea, probably the Black Sea, and they were somehow the Russians were able to jam or evade NATO radar. Like they flew all the way across Ukraine, they evaded NATO radar. There's evidence to shock NATO. Like NATO was shock NATO leadership. They were a little more reluctant for direct intervention at that time, anyway. Okay. Also, next thing, the Russians partially encircled Kiev for a time. They never want to take Kiev. That was nonsense. Kiev was protected by between 60,000 and 70,000 Ukrainian troops, plus fortifications, while the Russians got like between 30,000 and 40,000 troops. The idea was to pin down troops, Ukrainian troops, while the Russians took care of the Donbass region, Mariupol. And they succeeded with Mariupol. They succeeded. There's epic siege, Mariupol. Mariupol is a predominantly Russian-speaking city. They had overwhelmingly voted to join the Donetsk People's Republic in 2014. They were prevented from this. They were occupied by the Azov Battalion. Now that's the Azov Regiment. They were the Nazis. They were prevented from it. And so anyway, epic sees the Ukrainian regular army plus some of these Nazi groups who are occupying the Azov-style steel plant, vast steel complex, apparently a vast underground complex. They're holed up there. Was holed up there. There's an epic siege going on for weeks. It was fascinating to follow. Weird, interesting parallels with the Battle of Stalingrad, where if you remember the Nazis were holed up at a tractor factory. Also, during the Second World War, in Mariupol itself, the original Nazis had holed up in Azov style as well. So as history repeating itself, kind of. There was some buzz that some high-ranking NATO leadership were there with the Ukrainians and with the Nazis in Azov style. We still don't really know. There's a lot of weird buzz. We don't really know. Okay, anyway. So the Russians succeeded. They took Mariupol, and they're welcomed as liberators there, which they are liberators. They're welcomed as liberators, and they took large parts of the Donbass. They're still fighting for Lugansk. Okay, so there are the false flags, false flag narratives. There's the Bucha massacre. Bucha is a suburb of Kiev. It was occupied by Russia for a time, and I forget the month, but the Russians withdrew. And the first 2 days, no one said anything. There was an interview with the mayor of Bucha, Ukrainian mayor Bucha. He didn't say anything about this, but 3 days later, there were dead bodies in the streets. And by the way, the dead bodies looked like they'd been freshly killed, and no one, as far as I know, has done adequate forensics investigation on this. But anyway, the media blamed the Russians. These Russians killed people and dropped the bodies on the streets. Well, more likely, and CNN or media play this over and over again, horrible, evil Russians are killing people in the streets. Well, what looked like happened, the people who were killed were probably killed by Ukrainian security, SBU or some of these Nazi groups. They were believed to be local Ukrainians who would collaborate with the Russians, maybe stuff like in food distribution or relief, things like that. They were targeted by these Nazis and they were killed, and they dumped the bodies on the streets and blamed the Russians for it. Next one was the Kramatorsk attack. A train station, Kramatorsk, the city of Kramatorsk was believed to be in the front lines of the Russian advance, and the train station was packed with elderly people desperate to get out of the city. It was hit by a missile, and the media blamed the Russians for this, and I don't know how many people were killed. The media blamed the Russians for this. Turns out that it was hit by a Tochka missile, a Soviet-era Tochka missile, which is only used by the Ukrainians. So that narrative fell apart. Oh, there was more recently, I think about 4 weeks ago, there was a shopping mall attack, a missile strike on a shopping mall, large regional shopping mall, and media blamed the Russians for targeting civilian areas. But it turned out the shopping mall itself only had 3 cars in the parking lot and had been closed to civilian use since February. Another thing blamed on the Russians was the Ism Massacre. There was media showed the cemetery, Ism Cemetery, which was believed the Russians got rid of the bodies for their massacre. They massacred people, 600, blamed it was some figure on 600 people, and they dumped the bodies. Well, this Ism Cemetery, I've seen pictures of it. Each grave has a cross, and it's very well tended. It's a cemetery. It's not a dumping ground for massacre victims. It's a cemetery. It's a municipal cemetery. American cities have those. And it doesn't look like there was an Ism Massacre. Media ran with this over and over. A whole bunch of this. The biggest one, one of the early ones, was the Mariupol Theater bombing. The attack on hit by missile at Mariupol Theater. It's media blame the Russians. You can Google now. CNN website or Wikipedia website, maybe 300 people were killed or 600 people were killed. I've seen the figure 600 people. Well, closer investigation story kind of falls apart, and it would take a whole video to cover exactly what happened. It's very murky, but there are holes in the official story. It is known as Mariupol was occupied by the Azov Battalion. They are known to have taken very often civilian hostages. There are interviews to people. the Azov people occupied apartment buildings, and they threatened to shoot anyone who'd come and go. Like people were trying to were risking they're shooting at people as they did their grocery shopping. They were trapped in these apartment buildings. They have to delegate someone to run out and buy some groceries, and snipers would just shoot at them. I mean, they were holding people as human hostages, and there are stories that several dozen, not 300, but several dozen people were holed up in this theater, and apparently they were being kept there by the Azov people, Azov guards. It was a false flag. It was timed. The attack on this theater was timed about the same time that Zelensky was speaking to the U.S. Congress, and he was asking for a no-fly zone, which effectively would have meant a direct war with Russia. There's buzz about the no-fly zone. It would have gotten the U.S. into fly zone means no planes are allowed to fly. Means the U.S. would shoot down Russian planes. They were trying to set that up. It was a little too much, and they backed away from that. But the Mariupol attack was timed for that. There were big holes in the official story. Now, it would take a whole video to fully, but I think the mainstream story is bullshit. It looks like people had survived. We don't know who hit it. It was hit by a missile strike. We have no idea who. The mainstream stories, that was the biggest falsehood. There were a whole bunch of other stories. Where I live, the Portland Press Herald, Portland, Maine, Portland Press Herald, back in, I think it was April or May, so they had this headline article. I seldom read it. I was at work. I worked with kids. I was with a bunch of kids who went to a convenience store and bought a few things. And this paper said, Russians are now indiscriminately bombing civilians. No, they're not. That's fucking bullshit. No, they're not. The Russians had humanitarian corridors. They occupied Mariupol. They had an agreement with the Ukrainians, humanitarian corridor to let civilians out of the area. They were going very, very slowly and methodically. Okay, so, now there's a figure, Scott Ritter, who I think is a heroic figure. He was a U.S. Marine intelligence officer in the Iraq War, the first Iraq War. Later on, I'm not too big on that, but later on he worked as a UN arms inspector in Iraq to check if Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, nerve gas especially. And he was very honest. He was under a lot of political pressure by Madeleine Albright and the State Department under Madeleine Albright to, lean towards their side, make up stuff, or fudge data a little bit. Say, yeah, I mean, we have to get tough with Iraq. They are violating it. And, he had a sense of integrity. Scott resisted this. Said no. He had a sense of integrity. So the FBI tried to destroy him. Effectively, did destroy him. He has 2 pedophile charges against him. I think he's innocent. It's complicated, and it take a long time to get into the details of it. He might have done some stupid stuff, but it looks like a classic FBI entrapment operation. They do this literally all the time, and I don't know all the details. One case in Pennsylvania, he was living in Pennsylvania at the time. He was apparently in a chat room for people 18 and over. You had to be an 18 or over to be in the chat room, and apparently he sent a dick pic or something sexually explicit to someone who claimed to be 15. It turned out to be an male FBI agent who was in his 40s, and Scott Ritter said he knew this, but anyway, he did prison time for this thing, and Scott Ritter is not a pedophile. He's never committed an act of pedophilia. The FBI he might have done some stupid stuff, and I don't know all the details. The charges, by the way, have been vacated by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He was innocent. Both charges were effectively thrown out. The FBI wanted to destroy him. I don't know all the details, and Scott Ritter may very well have done some stupid stuff, but he's not a pedophile. Okay, and people who are like either pedophiles or very friendly to pedophiles, like Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, so many other people are, working free right now. They try to destroy someone like Scott Ritter. Okay, anyway, what I want to more concentrate on is his military, is his analysis. He's interviewed a lot on alternate media sites, on YouTube and elsewhere, and he's a pretty interesting guy. He's a wealth of military experience, and his heart is definitely in the right place, and I largely agree with him. He's gotten a few things wrong early on. Like he said, early on, the war would be over by May. It's obviously not. But he said, I don't remember when this was. I think it was in probably June, July, maybe late May, June. He started being a little more pessimistic about Russian victory. The Russians are winning. the Russians are winning, and I agree with them absolutely. But it's a little more different. There's a huge amount of U.S. aid going to Ukraine, like at least 50 billion. I think another 5 or 10 billion after that. He said this is going to make a difference. No matter how you play, the Russians are still going to win, but it's going to be more tougher, more slower, much more slower. It's going to upset their timetable. It's going to be a little different story. And there was a firestorm, like alternate media. People watch alternate media. So up in comments, there's a lot of criticism. A lot of criticism against Scott Ritter. Most of the people who follow alternate media, either in the radical left, libertarians, or like anti-globalist, populist right, whatever, most of these people, including myself, are pro-Russian. And people got so pissed off at Scott Ritter. This is really threatening. Oh, he's hysterical. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Gonzo Lira, who's another commentator, started attacking him, and others did. Well, and turned out he was right. Well, more recently, I think about a month or so ago, he said, a few weeks, 2 weeks ago or whatever, said, Russia is at a standstill. No, okay, no, he was, sorry, Scott Ritter started saying this back in I think it was spring, early summer, and he was really attacked for it. But anyway, then there was September. There was a Ukrainian offensive. They tried the city of Kharkov.